Imagine a world where evolution has gone completely wild, creating creatures so massive they defy belief. The chilling reality of polar gigantism will reveal why the coldest oceans hide Earth's most monstrous inhabitants. Imagine you're lost in the Antarctic Ocean, and you make the mistake of looking down into the water below you. You might think all you'd see are tiny fish or clouds of microscopic plankton, but what you actually find is much more terrifying. Spiders with leg spans exceeding 60 centimeters are crawling around on the seafloor. Jellyfish with tentacles longer than blue whales are slowly drifting by. And even the most normal-looking fish are now abnormally gigantic. These creatures are all real, products of an environment so freezing cold that evolution has gone completely off the rails. This is the world of polar gigantism, a phenomenon most people are totally unaware of because it only happens in the coldest oceans on Earth. You might expect that in a place where everything is freezing and food is scarce, most animals would get smaller to conserve energy, but the complete opposite happens. All animals in this region transform into supersized variants of themselves, making small things big and big things huge. So, why is this effect even happening? To understand polar gigantism, let's examine its most blatant example, the colossal squid. Many believe the colossal squid is a case of deep-sea gigantism, but that's not entirely accurate. Colossal squids are found almost exclusively in the oceans surrounding Antarctica, swimming in waters close to or even below 0 degrees Celsius. Due to salinity, the water doesn't actually freeze at 0 degrees Celsius, but it is still incredibly cold, forcing these squids to adapt. Colossal squids are a type of glass squid, a family named after translucent squids that, well, look like glass. So, why do colossal squids look like anything but a glass squid? This is polar gigantism at work. In an environment this cold, being see-through isn't particularly useful. The colossal squid's body traded transparency for thick flesh, which is far better for insulation. Yet, it didn't give up stealth. Their bodies have a reddish skin color that absorbs any light from bioluminescent prey instead of reflecting it, meaning you'll never see them coming. When you're this large, you have few predators besides the occasional sperm whale, so your body is designed for sneaking up rather than sneaking away. But this still doesn't explain why colossal squids are so huge in the first place. The answer isn't in the food, but in the water itself. Cold water holds significantly more oxygen than warm water. For almost all animals, a larger body requires more oxygen for its cells to simply stay alive. In warm waters, there isn't enough dissolved oxygen to support exceptionally large creatures. But at 0 degrees Celsius, oxygen is abundant. With this oxygen limiter broken, millions of years of evolution push these glass squids into giants, or should I say, colossals. As they grew so massive, they simultaneously shed their glassiness. Larger bodies are also better at storing heat and energy, so evolution literally forced these squids to get bigger and bigger or face extinction. It's worth noting that giant squids, which are also massive, don't live in polar oceans. Their size is primarily due to deep-sea gigantism. Colossal squids, however, live even deeper than giant squids, so deep-sea gigantism plays a role. But their enormous size isn't solely attributable to depth. Most of it is because of the cold. Colossal squids are a rare case of double crossover gigantism, combining both polar and deep-sea gigantism to create one truly immense creature. This is likely why colossals are the largest invertebrates on Earth. While not technically longer than the giant squid, they are much heavier, weighing over 450 kilograms, which is double the weight of a giant squid. However, the colossal squid is just one example of polar gigantism, and it doesn't solely prove that cold water creates giants. Consider this creature, a normal sea spider found in a coral reef. These aren't true spiders, they're pycnogonids. These particular sea spiders are typically about 1 to 2 centimeters across, roughly the size of a common house spider. But find this same animal in the Antarctic Ocean, and it looks like this. A spider over 60 centimeters across, belonging to the exact same family as the tiny one I just showed you. What's happening here? The same rules that transformed glass squids into colossals have compelled these sea spiders to grow larger. Cold water means more oxygen, and these creatures literally breathe through their legs. You can already see how freakishly long they are, allowing them to absorb a tremendous amount of oxygen. But what can they do now that they're so big? Unlike crabs or lobsters, giant sea spiders aren't brawlers, they are predators. They creep across the seafloor on their massive legs, using them almost like stilts to step over sponges, corals, and starfish. They then often use their long proboscis like a straw, piercing a starfish and sucking out its insides like a milkshake. And since this is the Antarctic Ocean, the starfish are also ginormous. You might be thinking, that barely looked like a starfish. But this is a real Antarctic starfish, just one with over 50 arms instead of the typical 5. Antarctic starfish are on another level of bizarre, because they didn't just grow larger. Evolution started stacking on as many arms as it pleased. Most normal starfish are predators too, eating the insides of creatures like clams. But Antarctic starfish are so brutal they'll even eat other starfish. I suppose whoever has the most arms wins. Antarctic starfish can also live for over 40 years on average, significantly longer than the 5-year lifespan of warm water starfish. This, too, is polar gigantism at play, forcing these once cute creatures to develop into gigantic oddities. Funnily enough, the effect of polar gigantism is so powerful that it's also responsible for creating the longest animal on Earth, the lion's mane jellyfish. Compare its length to that of a blue whale, and you'll see the lion's mane is notably longer. Of course, the blue whale has far more mass, but this still illustrates the sheer scale of polar gigantism. If you compare a jellyfish in the same genus as a lion's mane, such as the blue jellyfish, you'll observe how much smaller they are. Blue jellyfish live in warm water and, because of that, were never forced to become massive. After seeing all these oversized monsters of the deep, you're probably wondering how high oxygen alone could allow these things to get so out of control. While that is a large part of the reason, it's not the complete answer. Because the water is so cold, metabolism also slows down massively. So much so that large bodies actually become more efficient. They burn less energy per unit of animal mass. On top of this, the cold ocean is remarkably stable. I know that sounds strange, given the giant monsters I've just shown you, but the temperature here barely changes. The pressure is constant, and predators are rare. There's nothing forcing these animals to stay small and fast. They can afford to be massive, slow, and built like tanks, precisely the strategy the colossal squid developed. However, you might be asking, if the cold makes things bigger, then is a polar bear an example of polar gigantism, since they're much larger than other bears, or penguins, which are considerably larger than most birds? The truth is, polar gigantism only applies to cold-blooded animals, creatures that allow the environment to control their body temperature and obtain oxygen directly from the water. For them, colder water means more oxygen, a slower metabolism, and zero energy wasted on generating heat. Warm-blooded animals, however, face a different challenge. They must constantly burn energy to stay warm, regardless of how cold the water or air gets. The bigger they get, the more calories they need, and in the polar region, there simply isn't enough food to support something that massive. Every extra 45 kilogram of body mass comes with a huge metabolic cost. So, even if they're not necessarily gigantic, why are they still big? This is explained by something called Bergmann's rule. Bergmann's rule states that in all climates, warm-blooded animals do tend to get bigger, but not because of oxygen. It's because larger bodies lose heat more slowly. That's why polar bears are significantly bigger than other bears, and emperor penguins dwarf tropical birds. The extra body mass helps them retain warmth longer, acting like built-in insulation. But there's a limit. Being warm-blooded means you're constantly expending energy to stay alive, so getting too big becomes a massive liability. The larger you are, the more food you need, and in the polar regions, food is already scarce. This is the same reason woolly mammoths grew so large but never completely out of control. So, while Bergmann's rule provides a size advantage for warmth, it never allows for the colossal squid mode that polar gigantism enables. On a much smaller scale, even plankton have their colossal versions. Antarctic copepods are the polar gigantism equivalent of plankton and are nearly 10 times heavier than tropical copepods. For reference, most copepods are so small you can barely see them without a microscope, typically not even a millimeter long. Antarctic copepods, however, can reach up to a centimeter in length, large enough to be seen swimming with the naked eye. While not monstrous like colossal squids, in the world of plankton, these are absolute behemoths. But here's the weirdest part. Not everything in the polar oceans experienced the gigantism effect. A select few animals actually went in the complete opposite direction, an effect called polar dwarfism. While extremely rare, with a vast majority of animals experiencing gigantism, some Antarctic fish species, like certain icefish and snailfish, are noticeably smaller than their relatives in warmer waters. In these extreme environments, food isn't always available year-round. Evolving a smaller body means they can reach adulthood faster, reproduce sooner, and survive longer periods of scarcity. When food is only available for a few months out of the year, staying small can literally be the difference between life and death. And having a much faster reproduction cycle ensures the species' survival. It's not as dramatic as turning into a giant sea monster, but it's still an interesting evolutionary adaptation. A peculiar side effect of the cold is that it doesn't just change what evolves, it changes how fast evolution itself occurs. In the polar ocean, everything runs in slow motion, meaning chemical reactions, metabolism, and reproduction all slow down. A single generation of some Antarctic animals can take decades to complete. As I mentioned, even starfish now survive for decades, instead of just a few years. This makes evolution take much longer, and it already spans millions of years. Many of these species are essentially living fossils, almost identical to their ancestors that swam under the Antarctic ice tens of millions of years ago. Some sea spider, urchin, and fish lineages have barely changed since before humans even existed. With no drastic seasons in the Antarctic, species here have remained practically frozen in time for millions of years. The environment barely changes, so evolution never needed to either. Every creature here is fine-tuned for a world that's stable, predictable, and cold. A world that has worked flawlessly for millions of years. But that very stability is precisely what makes the Antarctic so fragile. When an entire ecosystem depends on everything staying the same, even a small shift can shatter it. The moment the environment begins to change, the rules that built these giants start to collapse. Because being a super mega frost giant sounds truly awesome, until suddenly it isn't. Polar giants have one massive weakness. They are all built for stability, not change. Their entire existence depends on water that remains freezing, dense, and packed with oxygen. Remove those conditions, and the whole system collapses. Warmer water holds less oxygen. Metabolism speeds up, and suddenly those massive bodies become a liability. The animals that once ruled the frozen deep begin suffocating in their own size. Bring any of these monsters into a warm, friendly tropical ocean, and they would literally die from the heat. This is already happening. As the oceans warm, oxygen levels are dropping fast, and the creatures that evolved to thrive in the cold are running out of room to survive. Studies have shown that sea spider maximum sizes are actually decreasing in areas where the water is getting slightly warmer. Although they are much harder to study, this implies that colossal squids could eventually become less colossal or even die out altogether. While I would never want to encounter one of these giant monsters face to face, it's somewhat sad to contemplate. These creatures are living relics from a different world, and in any case, they pose virtually no threat to us. The total number of human deaths from colossal squids is 0 because no one has ever been attacked by one. Ultimately, the effect that cold has on evolution is perhaps one of the strangest and most unexpected reasons for gigantism. Freeze the ocean, and life won't die. It just gets giant.